to have Dr. George Simons with us. He's the creator and editor-in-chief of the award-winning Diversity Intercultural Competence series of games. He's a consultant, lecturer, trainer in intercultural communication and negotiation. He authored and edited Eurodiversity, a business guide to managing difference, and is co-author of Putting Diversity to Work, 7 Ways to Lighten Your Life Before You Kick the Bucket, as well as 8 cultural detective intercultural guides. Currently, he focuses on developing tools and expertise for the acculturation of migrants and local communities to each other. Living in France, he delivers consultation, coaching, training, and training designed worldwide. Thank you. On to you, George.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be invited here. And I see a number of familiar names and lots of new people to meet here today. I'm basically a catch-all at this point, which is to say you've been talking about cultural competence for quite a while now, and I don't know all the stuff that you've covered, so I'm going to give you my particular view on where I go with this, and I'm open to questions at any time and discussion at any time, so please feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. Better if you raise your hand, I suppose. I'm also a first-time user for Google Meeting. Most of the stuff we do is on Zoom, so I'm counting on you folks to steer me along if I get stuck on it. But I see we have about over 20 people at this point. So let me start. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here and just share a window and let's see, where am I here? Why is it not up? Okay, I see what the problem is. Okay, now the question is, do you folks see this PowerPoint?
No.
No, okay, that's a good start. See if I put it up here. Oh, yes. Okay, now I have to go back then, I suppose. And maybe I have to, what do I have to do here? This is bad.
Did you click on to present now?
What's that?
Present now at the bottom.
Yeah, I did. Let me close this down then.
And you need to select which window you want to share.
Yeah, I see that. I'm trying to get out of the window I'm in. That's the problem. Let me get rid of that. Okay.
Take your time. No worries. Meanwhile, we are greeting each other on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Start presentation. Start send current slide. Okay. You don't see anything, huh? Okay. I have to get out of here then and go back here and say Simon's PowerPoint share. Okay, it says I'm sharing. You're presenting on
now.
Your...
Yes, it's coming now.
Now we see it now.
You see it now, okay, but I don't.
Yes. Yeah.
There we go. And you should be able to see it in full screen if I click on something here. Play from start. So, got it full screen there?
Perfect.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay. What I want to talk about today is the fact that cultural competence has become very much a matter of everyday existence. And we're living in a world where there's lots of conflict. And I think what has happened to us mostly is that we're really becoming conscious of what works and what doesn't work in our world, because one of my favorite quotes comes from a singer, Leonard Cohen, who says, there's a crack in everything. that's how the light gets in. And certainly the COVID crisis and other world issues at the moment have begun to show us where a lot of things that we were figuring were relatively stable in the world are not so. And it's a moment of opportunity, I feel, for interculturalists who want to study and make a difference in the world to figure out the dynamics of what makes cultural competence work now. And, we sort of started out, this is from 1735, and this is a painting that's in an Austrian museum that I found, and it's the peoples of Europe and their characteristics. And they have all of these people labeled, and then they say their names, their habits, their consciousness, their feelings, their religion, what they like to eat, how they dress, and so on and so forth. And supposedly it tells you everything about everybody, except, of course, on the last on the list are the Turks and the Greeks, who apparently are the same, although they didn't feel that way about each other. And what you notice is that back in 1735, there were no women in the world. There were just men. So, they're all guys. So, words have power. And the fabulous thing about these things is, by the way, I can make this available to you if you like. But this is the translation of that German thing. And what you find is that everybody has characteristics throughout the ages here, some of which are still stereotypes that we have of different cultures. So I don't want to dwell on that. I just want to say that we've come to a new stage in the intercultural thinking where we're realizing the damage of this. Some of you may know Amin Malouf's wrote a wonderful book about deadly identities. And a quote I have of him here, which I think is really appropriate, is taking the line of least resistance, we lump the most different people together under the same heading. We ascribe to them collective crimes, collective acts, and opinions. So basically, we're still struggling with how we label people and a kind of new tribalism and emphasis on our ethnic and national identities, stoked by politicians, particularly in search of power, because if they can create an identity and a story of an identity, they can control it, okay? So what I want to do is I want to share my view of what culture is and how we manage it. Culture is a shared discourse, a way of talking that tells us what to value, what to pay attention to, and how we should act. It's been called mental software, how we talk to ourselves and each other so we can survive and succeed in the environment we share. But one of the latest good pieces of work in this field using brain science points out that culture is maybe a sub-program in the mental software. The mental software is how we sort out the different things in different contexts and how we behave and talk in those contexts. And of course, it has the rhythms and synchronicity that are involved in that process. Now, what I do when I have a class, which I'm not sure I'm going to have anymore in these days, except online, ask the question, where does cultural narrative, where do our cultural stories come from? And if those of you who are listening had a little volume button on your head, and I could turn up the volume button, I'm wondering what I would hear, because, actually, it seems like I'm the only one talking, but everybody in this room is actually, in this call, is actually probably, due to their identities, they are probably talking to themselves 8 times as fast as I am, which is to say, culture is speaking to us all the time. The stories and the memories of what we have there, and the fact that you're listening, you're talking to yourself so quickly, is really what we call listening. In other words, we're talking to ourselves. And by the way, when I use the word talking, I'm talking about all the stuff that happens inside, whether it's that we're actually speaking to ourselves in words or bringing forth images or feelings, and all of that at the same time. And the surprise definition that I want to make here is that this talking to ourselves is what we call listening. We're trying to find out, what is this? What is happening? What should I do about it? Now, interestingly, listening is often saying, okay, we try not to have anything interfere with what the other person is saying. But that's not true. Listening is our talking to ourselves, trying to interpret what's coming at us, whether it's someone speaking or something happening or whatever. So we're constantly talking to ourselves. Now, that's not to say it's not a good practice to do meditation sometimes, where you just sit down and let the mind quiet itself with some simple act like watching your breathing and so on. This is very good and very healthy. But listening is not about making yourself silent. Listening is about sorting through the conversations that you're having with yourself. So every waking moment, we're talking to ourselves about the things we experience. Our self-talk, the thoughts we communicate to ourselves, each of these in turn controls how we feel and how we act. So if I want to give a definition of culture, I take it from a children's book that I once saw, in which these two little characters, a crow and a weasel, are talking to each other. And one of them says, the stories people tell have a way of taking care of them. If stories come to you, care for them and learn to give them away where they are needed. Sometimes a person needs a story more than food to stay alive. That's why we put these stories in each other's memory. This is how people care for themselves. So what I'm getting at here is that we have, when we speak about culture, culture is a real, tangible thing. Culture. Sometimes when I do this course, I show people a piece of meat, okay? And I say, what if I told you culture was meat? And a sort of bewildered look on everybody's face. And I say, well, okay, maybe that's the wrong cut. And then I put a picture of a brain up on the screen. And I say, so maybe we had the wrong cut there. But actually, culture is a living, concrete, real thing inside of part of our system, okay? Culture is as real as your fingertips, is as real as your kneecap. It happens to be the way the neurons are running around in your head, producing what is your listening and the options you have for going someplace. So I hope that doesn't sound too radical, but I think that's what neuroscience is telling us these days very, very well, And, we have arguments with ourselves, and that's part of the inner discussion. So, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves, what are the important stories that I've heard about who I am, how I am, and what I am? What's my identity? And these are stories that we have both learned and built on and give away to each other. There are conflicts inside of us, Sorry about that one. But, the dog saying, should I scratch on the door to go outside or should I pee on the rug? I don't think dogs say that to themselves, but human beings say, have arguments with themselves about what's the best thing to do next. So if we want to talk about intercultural or cultural competence, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at knowing ourselves. We're talking about understanding other people in the context in which we find them and in which they behave or speak to us, identifying the big stories that we're immersed in, and then doing our best to bridge similarities and differences so that we not only did somebody say something? I heard a sound. We're okay? Okay. So what we need to do is be aware of where we might have breakdowns, analyze and repair those, but most of all, by connecting with each other and sharing our stories, we can create new and better possibilities. Let me pause for a second. All I see is my big screen here. Is there any comment, question here? How do I go back to you guys? Wait a minute. I'll get rid of that, and I'm back here. I see everybody's muted.
Well, anyone can activate their microphones. This is precisely what we have been talking about during our session about knowing yourself, oneself, in order to understand others in context.
Okay, that's good. You're right on target there, I guess. So I just wanted to emphasize the fact that I believe that this approach to seeing ourselves in the cultural context is being immersed in a story, and in many stories. What French sociologist called the meta-narratives, the meta-récit, which basically drive our world. Now I'm going back, and tell me if you see my full screen now again.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, yeah. Sorry to be such a native here, but so these are the tasks that are involved in intercultural competence. And what I'd like to emphasize today is I'd like to discuss further this business of identifying the master narratives that we live by. Now, I had a discussion not too long ago with Napoleon, and I mentioned that we live in a world shaped by the stories we tell about who we are. And Napoleon came back with something he actually really said. History is a series of lies we all agree on. Richard White echoed that well, as history is the enemy of memory. And I think it's really interesting because what we realize is that our challenges are much more complex sometimes than we think they are. About 10 years ago, I went back to my home in California. I'm living in France now, and I'd been living here already for 15 years when I did that. And I had a room in which I had about 25 years of personal journals and a collection of correspondence, both from my parents and so on. And I decided that I wanted to take that somehow with me and get rid of my house and those kind of things. But what I found was that when I went back and read some of the journals and some of the correspondence that I had, I had been telling people stories about the past that weren't exactly the way I found them in the record of the time in which they occurred, which is to say that we are constantly remaking our stories, hopefully for our benefit and the benefit of others, but it's not always that same story. Now, I'm sure most of you have already had some discussion about this idea of the idea of not simply inclusion, but the idea of what we call unconscious bias. And frankly, I don't like the word unconscious bias, because usually if you use it in a conversation with somebody, it kind of has the accusation like you're biased. What it really means is that your story content, the ready interpretations that your mind has for listening to reality, which it is constantly showing you, chatting with you about, making you feel things automatically, which is there for your well-being and your safety and security, is onwardly going. And the reason we talk about bias is it means it's using the word in its simplest meaning. A bias is something that's slanted in one direction or another direction. And our minds have picked out what they feel to be the safest ways of interpreting certain things. And of course, as you all know from your work in culture at this point, in a global society, when, you know, most of us have left any semblance of the small town family tribal existence where everybody tends to think more like each other, that our mind interprets stories that we've heard and applies them to other people automatically. Now, I mean, I'm not going to be able to change the world from talking about bias, unconscious bias, but I like the way that this writer, George Lakoff, who's a very, very, very astute character, he talks about it as conceptual framings. And I like that. You know, if somebody comes to the door and I don't know them and I look at them, my mind already starts interpreting who they are by what they're dressed, by how they look and how they talk and so on and so forth. So I prefer the idea of framing rather than bias, which tends, I think, to be accusatory. But Lakoff was on target here because he's talking about the fact that our understanding of the world is a part of the world. It's a physical part of our world. It's our brain meat, as I sort of mentioned before. So that we create with these stories our own way of life and the things that we create for our life. And I kind of like this little cartoon, which is one of the best definitions or explanations of what we call social construction. And it's, whoops, sorry, how did she get in here? Okay, where did I want to go? I'm going to go back down here. Here it is. So, sure, money's imaginary, but at least it's got everybody imagining it. And it's very interesting. We're at an interesting time because with the lockdown, I hardly ever use any money anymore. Everything is on a credit card or online or whatever. And I opened my wallet the other day when I did have a chance to go shopping and realized that the bills in my wallet, the paper money in my wallet, had basically been there for like a month without having been touched. So this is the idea of the fact that we create stories. Stories create the realities we live by, And of course, these stories have various influences on us. So I'm going to go back here now. A couple, yeah, here's where I left off. This woman here on the right, in the colorful outfit, some of you may know. That's May Gwyn, and she teaches now in the Netherlands, and recently, I think, spent a year or something in Australia. She's from Vietnam, and she began life as a journalist. And about 5-6 years ago, after having become a university professor for a number of years, she got a sabbatical, and she walked through, I think, close to a dozen different Arab countries by herself to see this world, which seemed so closed off to so many people. And she's really, she's one of my heroes. At my age, I have to have heroes that are younger than me, so some of them are actually on this call. But she is such an astute observer, and she has the book I've sorted here. She has 2 books really top-notch in the direction of how we apply what we know about brain science to culture nowadays. Maybe you're already familiar with her work. But the quote I have here is that thoughts that dominate your mind are those that have the shortest distance to cover and the easiest way to travel. A cell assembly of neurons that fire together rapidly without much effort. This means repeated thoughts will be experienced more easily each time you have them. So people who talk about neural programming nowadays are saying that, okay, you have perhaps these frames or these unconscious biases, but by new kinds of repetition, you can begin to train your mind to think more flexibly in other directions. So that's her point. And a couple of other observations about this. Homer said that men praise that song most comes newest to their ears, which is to say, we tend to also somehow value and weigh out things by the novelty that comes, and it creates more attention because it's new and novel. And finally, what is the most dangerous thing in our world today, I believe, is the fact that propaganda, the big lie, is easily constructed in all kinds of political, social, commercial contexts, and it becomes, by repetition, the truth in the heart. Needless to say, you can tell from my accent, I'm an American guy, even though I haven't lived in the States for now probably 35 years. I visited a few times, but the point is that, you know, we have people who believe in alternative realities, whether influenced by politicians, as Donald Trump tried to do with the last election, or the people who have these massive anti-vaccine mythologies. It's amazing how we can live in different worlds in a time of such mass communication. But what has been known since the turn of the last century, not 1800 and 1900, is where we started to realize that if you repeat something often enough, it becomes true for a lot of the listeners. So this is one of those incredible challenges that we are faced with today. And as I notice what's going on in the different intercultural groups that I see online, lots of discussion about how do we deal with people whose reality is different from our own. My own experience is this incredible difference in division of belief through politics and religion that's going on in so many places. At one point, I think many of us thought we were escaping from this, and now it seems to be just emerging everywhere in the new populism, and now that technology can actually imitate and fake most anything, all right? I'm not a TikTok fan, but I realize that you may not be listening to me. Somebody may have taken some images of me and is now using my voice to tell you all this stuff. So you may wonder, huh? No, actually, it's me. Please, it is me, I hope. Unless somebody's messing with what's going on in between us. But at any rate, repetition is the mother of propagating errors. We used to say, repetitio est mater studiorum, that repetition is the key to learning. But now it's the key to propagating errors in the world we live in, which to me means we have a real big challenge as interculturalists to understand how social stories are constructed and help people understand how they work and how we might escape from them. George Lakoff again saying, unless you frame yourself, others will frame you, the media, your enemies, your competitors, even your well-meaning friends. So that's how that works. And so then the question is, how do we get around this sort of stuff? Let me pause for a minute and anybody questions, observations? Am I going over stuff you already are totally familiar with, or?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Please feel free to ask the question if you have any, or you can make a comment. Yes, you can turn on your mic and you can ask the question directly.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything. Is anybody trying?
Yeah, is anybody trying?
Yeah, I'll talk.
Difficulty?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Mushtaq, Lalita here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
A nice talk. I enjoyed all your, George, I enjoyed all the quotes. There was something very different from what I've heard. But I am from India and I do generally business communication, in business English and culture, intercultural communication. I've read and I'm also part of your group. India is such a vast country. Though people don't realize that there are so many different subcultures, or when I told somebody about intercultural communication, they said India has itself so many examples. If you take the Far East, it's almost by their looks as well as their way they talk, their festivals are very Chinese and Asian, while we have in the Northwest, almost same as Afghan. So India itself as a country has so many different interesting cultural differences, some oblique and some hidden. So I found that in India, you cannot really say Indians are like this, because Indian culture, I mean, people themselves have so many different cultural influences. For example, the North India, they've had a number of wars. The South India has been sheltered from wars. The language, in fact, the Tamil language which the South Indians speak is older than Sanskrit or any of the Indian languages. The music, if you take up any part, it's so different. So we need to understand. And what has happened is because of travel and movement of people from one place to the other, the understanding between cultures within India has also become more. And I also think because we are now traveling so much outside, we are able to understand people better. So but I really, that what you talked about, that lady Mai who traveled to the, I think, Arabian countries to study the Arab culture. I somehow feel that in India you can travel so much more and you will be really exposed to so many different cultures. I mean, this is my observation. I enjoyed what you said. I enjoyed all the quotes. But culture is stereotype. Culture is such a inborn thing, you know. Even I feel that it's such a, as you said, an unconscious bias. It is an unconscious bias because we don't really understand when we, something which is not familiar to us, we say some things and we sometimes comment on them. Then since you've learned about intercultural, then I just, you know, you pull yourself back and say, no, I cannot do this. But anyway, that's all a separate. I feel that people traveling to India should also realize that people are so different.
Well, I have to admit, I've been to India only 4 or 5 times and not really ever lived there, but also realized, you know, that the history and diversity of people and languages is enormous. So in a sense, you know, you already have a paradigm for the differences in the world. And as we're going forward, there is this challenge of how do we open up our frames and connect with other people in such a way that the potential of our differences is that we could create new and better things from this, as opposed to setting up stories and isolated identities and propaganda. So that's, to me, that's the challenge that I feel that we run into all the time here. Another comment was there?
Yeah, I agree with that, especially with the social media taking such a, becoming such an important part of our lives. We are generally get carried away by even propaganda. As I said, the truth in your, the lie in your throat becomes the truth in your heart. That I thought was a fantastic quote, because that's what's happening in a number of things in our country. Another thing I notice is if something happens in one part of the country, people in the, it is news for 2-3 days in another, maybe in the south, and after 2-3 days you forget, you move on to a next sensational news and things like that. I don't know, as people, are we connecting so much as we used to connect? Like when I was, of course, I'm also much older. When I was a child, when we had more face-to-face meeting, I felt that we connected better than we are connecting now. Now we are able to connect to many more people, but the connect is not so strong or...
Absolutely. And I think, you know, in this digital age, interesting thing happened to me here. I have, from time to time, interns in my office, and I'm about 4 times as old as they are. And what I discover is, besides learning a lot from them, this is a funny story because you think that, you know, I have interns in my office so I can teach them something. Well, actually, I probably learn more from them than they learn from me.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
But the interesting thing is, you know, I'm sitting in front of my computer here and I discover something, or I see a word or something that I don't know anything about. And I know where exactly in my bookcase where there's a book that will tell me about this, but I never get up out of my chair. I just Google it and discover it quicker than I can go and find it. Okay. Now, this speed and the enormous amount of content that is coming at us if we're involved in this kind of life is enormous. And I always thought, you know, my interns, I would say to my interns, oh gosh, you know, the days go by so quickly. I can't get enough done. You know, it's just, you know, I figure I'm going to meet myself coming out of the bedroom some morning, you know, as I'm on my way to bed. That's how fast the days seem to go. And they tell me that the days go just that fast. I thought it was an old age problem, but it's apparently, you know, the amount of information that passes through is so enormous on a daily basis that it makes time disappear. I mean, when I was in college, I had a little notepad. I wrote down things I wanted to look up. 2 times a week, I'd walk to the other end of the campus, go to the library, flip through the file catalog, find some books that might have what I wanted to know, go up the stairs and find the books, read the books, make my notes, come back down and go home, okay? All of this is done in 3 clicks now. You know, it's just utterly, utterly amazing. So at any rate, how do we deal with the future here? And of course, the challenge of, I don't know how our society is going to function post-pandemic, but I know it won't function. Culture will not be the same thing that it was before. Certainly work culture will change. Consumer culture seems to be changing, and you know, endless amounts of things given this new framework. Even if, you know, we totally eliminate the virus and no other one comes along for a while, life is going to be radically different. And it's going to be up to us to create the cultural stories that work and help us, as I mentioned in the definition, survive and succeed in the world that we have. Where I was intending to go with this a little bit is that getting to know ourselves, you've talked about that sort of thing. I'm in the process of creating a game on identity, and some of the people who've come here have played a few cards from that game online in our regular online series. But I'm just finishing off the whole big thing at the moment, and it's really very, the question of identity is really, really critical. And so what I'm trying to do is find and suggest ways for us to continue to get to know ourselves deeper and continue to see how our stories evolve. I mean, one of the things that I can spend in half a day in a workshop with people, I'll show you a little slide about it here in a second. Let me see. Where do I want to go? Yes. Okay, we were there. The stories that we tell ourselves about who we are the sort of I call it an culture. All of these master narratives that tell us about the meaning of our lives, the economy, the growth, the social context, and all these sort of things are stories that we tell ourselves. And of course, always I got a note here, West is best, because, you know, where we are has got to be the best, or we're going to feel bad about ourselves often. So overcoming these stories or rewriting these stories is quite a challenge. I just love this picture because, you know, the creatures here are different, but the cat doesn't seem to notice. Okay. So I was more about the framing. So we all bury these stories inside, some of which bleed and tell us, some of them which we twist to sell ourselves or make ourselves known. So these are self-discovery is about learning our story and also being in charge of our story and knowing how to communicate our story as we listen to other people's stories going forward. So I'm going to skip ahead here in these slides a bit. There it is. One of the things I like to do is I have a little exercise that I do, which is called What's in Your Name? And I have people just think a bit about the names that they have, where those names came from, how they were named and why they were named what they were named, and how they experienced their name throughout the various stages of their lives till the present. And each of us has a story about other people perceive us when they hear our name. So how we are described, how we are talked about. I have people spend a little bit of time thinking about that and then sharing and asking each other's questions about that. One of the things that somebody from India there can correct me on this or fill in a little bit more, that actually the old caste names, people are still recognizable in some dimension of caste because of the names they have. Is that still correct?
I don't, it is Lalita here. Yes, the caste names do, but now I don't think a lot of people use their caste names so much. It could be in certain parts of interior India. But apart from the caste names, in Hindus at least, the child is named after some great personality in the scriptures. For example, my grandson is called Arjun, and Arjun was a legendary warrior. And somehow your name sort of makes you feel that you become like that. So almost all Indian Hindu children are named after their, something from the mythology, something from their religion, history, their holy books. So we all have names. Even my name, Lalita, is supposed to be name of one of the goddess and is supposed to mean gentle. So we have all our names, definitely Sanskrit names connected to, which has some meaning because it's connected to your scriptures.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. But see, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. In addition to that, again, we have some family names. Okay, we call them surname. So some of the family names are directly linked with the castes, but not all of them. But yes, just looking at your family name, one can recognize so which caste you belong to. Yeah.
Like so, Sharmas and Pandits and we do have.
Yeah, true.
But even your first name has a meaning in India.
Yes.
First name also is always drawn from some scripture or the other. It's not random. Like.
Well, I put a list here of various things around the world that, first of all, just starting with my own name, George. George is originally a Greek name, and it means farmer. Okay, so it's not very exotic. Geo is the earth, and ergein is to work in Greek. So they put the two words together, and I'm an earth worker. Okay, I had an intern here whose name was Heidi. She called herself Haiti, and Haiti got that name because her mother was reading this nice little novel about the Swiss girl called Haiti. Probably the most used name in the world is Muhammad for men. And then we have names that have history behind them. Like I have a good friend whose name is Attila, which is a very honorable name in Hungary, but is seen as in the West as somebody who sort of brought devastation into Western Europe many centuries ago. Interestingly, some young women have very sweet names like Missy or Candy or things like that. And with the feminist movement nowadays, they feel like these names are demeaning. So a woman who was Kitty now becomes not, if you want to keep it in the cat domain, she's no longer Kitty, but she's Leona, the lion. Names, I'm not going to go through all of these. The interesting one is Quadjo down there, because it comes from a tribe where children get their first name as the name of the day on which they were born. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And Quadjo is one of those. And after you grow up and get some characteristics, you get other names. So there's just some samples, but I think it's really interesting to have people talk about what their names are, where they came from, and most of all, how they've experienced them in the stages of their lives. Was your name a very honorable one? Was your name one where people sort of looked down upon you because of your background or ethnicity because of the name? Did kids make fun of you at school? Did you get a nickname? What did your nickname mean? How you know, basically, when we talk about identity, you don't have an identity by yourself, okay? You may work on who you are, but it all fits into those around you who recognize you as this or that or the next thing, or among the many identities that you have, maybe from your background, from your ethnicity, from your work, from your vocation, from your family, and so on and so forth. So that's an exercise that I like to do, and have people dialogue with their names about that. And then I'll go down a little bit further here. Here's one of the ways I do it. I say, let's get acquainted. Meet yourself, okay? I have people take a selfie or pull out an ID or something that has their picture on it. And I say, ask yourself, selfie, become it, speak for it. What's it got to say about you, why you are who you are? What's the story of my name? Where do I hang out? What's home? Why do I want to be here today? All of the things that lead from your remote history to what you're doing at the very moment that we're talking about this sort of thing. So that's part of the story. And then our identity comes also, what games did we play growing up? What messages about life did they teach you? We look at, sometimes there are mixed games, but also a lot of games which are characteristic for girls differently than they are from boys. And it's big news these days as women are breaking into full participation at the higher levels of sport, which were once exclusively held out just for men. I have a couple of colleagues, and we actually do a 3-day workshop on gamification. In other words, how do we play and how do we create games and how do we learn from games? How do we connect with people through games? And obviously there's so many different ways of doing this that our individual experiences bring to that story. So, and the other thing I like about it is that when we try to learn by games, it's a safe place. It's a safe place. And as we've been playing, for example, our diversity games online, and a number of the people who have facilitated and played in these games, it's been astounding to see how people who have been perfect strangers have come to share and connect at very deep levels, even online. I think, when the lockdowns came for the virus and we were restricted in our social contact in many ways, we thought, oh, we're going to go online. But online can never bring really good competence or intimacy or the possibility of connection so much as face-to-face can. And what we're learning is that human need to connect and the ability to connect can work in this kind of environment to a very great degree. It's not the same as the other environment, and one of the things that makes it useful for any kind of intercultural training, whether it's a game or not, is making people safe to tell their stories and to reconnect. And when we reconnect, when we connect with each other and make it safe to tell our stories, then we start at creating the new cultural stories that will serve us better in the kind of world we're living on. That was sort of my stopping point here, and this is an hour long, right?
Yeah, so maybe we can take some questions.
I just leave it now for questions, maybe. I'll close down the PowerPoint group, and happy to chat or respond or listen to other people's perspectives on these things. Okay, there we go.
I think Pratik has a question. Pratik, could you please ask your question directly? Pratik?
Yes, sir. So basically, my question is that, like, nowadays the world has been become a big stage of opportunities where you can raise your voice, and teenagers like us are developing a kind of nature like they don't want to work under anyone. Like they want to start their own startups. They want to work only on their prospective ideas. So, is that right to develop this kind of tendency? Like where I observed most of my friends have same concept like me. Like in future, everyone develop this kinds of concept. Will it be right or wrong? I just want to know.
Well, I think what we've been talking about is pretty stable stuff. But as people connect with each other, sometimes the distance seems so great, and the interest seems not there. And one of the contributions that is really emerging in the intercultural field now, surprisingly, because it's been always available, is the sharing of art, poetry, music, fantasy, all that sort of thing, where people can safely share. And what the neuroscientists are telling us is that if you and I listen to the same piece of music, there is actually shaping in our neurosystem a connection with each other through this piece of music. One of my projects right now is working with a woman who is a director of a symphony orchestra, who is helping us write a game about leadership. And what we're doing is using a totally new metaphor. Now, everybody probably has different experiences in this regard, but for example, much of the business and management leadership metaphors that I see are like military, sports team oriented, and so on. And her point is that let's imagine that you are an orchestra, and she has the experience to bring the dynamics and dimensions of what goes on between a director of an orchestra and the players and their responsibility and their response to each other, as well as actually, this utterly amazed me. She said that musicians who are playing in the symphony orchestra can tell whether the audience is with them or not, whether the audience is enjoying what's happening. Not that they can see everyone or see everybody's face. It's in the vibration of the music in the room. This is a whole new area of exploration as to how we influence. I mean, we've always known, for example, that the size and shape and lighting of a room can affect how a negotiation takes place there, or how a class takes place there, how learning will take place there. The room itself sends a message which shapes what goes on inside of us. So I'm utterly fascinated with the possibilities that we have. And there's a guy by the name of Paul Schaefer who's in Canada, who's been a director of cultural affairs in a number of organizations, who's written some books about this. And he says we're going into the cultural age, where what we do in performance and art is going to be a major connector for how we live and work together. And obviously, if I have a totally different political outlook from yours, where do we catch some vibes? Well, we see something beautiful together. We listen to some music together, even by accident, and somehow there's some human connection beginning to go despite our ideological differences. Does that make sense to you? I'm utterly fascinated by these studies that are going on now here. Other questions, observations? So almost time to go. You're muted.
Yeah. Any question, please?
Any other observations, questions? So, well, I guess we just say thank you and see you again someplace, huh?
Yeah, sure. If you don't have any questions, so we shall stop here. So once again, I'm so grateful to you, George. So it was quite insightful and wonderful session, and we get a lot of insights. So maybe we can explore number of things in the classroom too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was wonderful session. So any question, please? I think we can take one question. No? Okay. Thank you so much.
Of course, we can invite our participants to join the diversity games, right? Here I
Yes,
have
absolutely.
posted your link.
So, Vicky, would you like to just say something about diversity? Vicky or Teresa or Camila? Yeah. Vicky, you are muted.
That's hard to do with Vicky. She's a pretty good talk. Oh,
Yeah.
your sound working.
Okay, no worries. We have Camila or Marina.
Yes, now that Vicky, I don't know what's happening there, but yeah, to all of you, we can invite you every Thursday at 7 p.m. time here in France. We can invite you so you can be free to share your experiences, share your stories, as George mentioned. It's a safe place so we can exchange our perspective about cultures. It's something that you really would like to do and meet new people from all around the world. You're more than welcome.
Yeah, it's on our website. And Mushtaq, if you want to put it on for these folks, the link. We're happy to have you all.
Sure. Absolutely. I'll share with them.
Good. Okay.
Thank you all, and enjoy your weekend then.
You too. Bye. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.